So, hello everyone. You probably figured it out just based on the title, but this is not going to be a technical talk. This is something that I honestly spent a little bit too much time on trying to debug, trying to figure stuff out, and I feel like it's a good thing in professional development, both to show the cycle of a resume from freshman year until now, as well as like give some tips and tricks, show what I did to kind of make myself a little bit different, and something that I feel like more people should do. So with that all out of the way, I'm going to start my presentation, making an HTML resume. So first, as a talk, you can see all my terrible photos on here. The presentation's professional doesn't mean I have any professional photos. So I'm the vice president of RITSec, as hopefully most of you know. I recently the RIT CPTC team I'm on as web and SE and the social engineering lead. Shout out to them. Winning regionals was a lot of fun. And I'm no longer an Arch user. Arch decided to give me some issues, so we now run Fedora. We see one person fist bumping. And I've interned a bunch of places. As you're gonna see with like my resume, it's gonna grow over the years. And I've been a lot of places, had a lot of worn a lot of hats, such and so forth. And especially with this, I don't understate. I spent a lot of time trying to figure this out. I suck at HTML, and through tens of hours of trial and error, I feel like I've kind of put together something nice. And I'm sure that there's a lot of other stuff that I'm not going to be talking about right now that I do. So let's start off why. Well, first off, if anyone's ever gotten curious on the RITSec YouTube channel and it's sorted by most popular, you'll see Using LaTeX to Build Your Resume by Sean Newman. Most viewed video by far. I think the next is around like 1,000 or so. So first off, maybe get some internet cloud points or something. Not really, but still something worth pointing out. Another thing worth pointing out, YouTube doesn't like Fedora, or at least this video doesn't like Fedora. On my phone it works, so I felt it was my own service to maybe make something that YouTube can now parse onto everything. I'm not exactly sure why that happens, but continually try to go onto it on my computer. So, but really, why do you need a resume? Why is a resume good to have? First off, you need a resume to get a job. Even this can either be your only impression, or you know the person and company you're applying to, and it's a formality. It's a here, now stamp it, and you have the job. Simple as that. But either way, you still need to have a resume. And with your resume, generally there's a couple tiers that you have to get past. First is the automated tracking system, ATS as some will shorten to it. This is generally going to go through your resume, say, hey, does this person have this skill? Does this person have this degree? Do they have this mentioned in their resume that would make them a good candidate? If you see online, there's all those people that are like, okay, copy and paste the job description, put it at the bottom of your resume, as small as possible with white text, and that's how you pass the ATX because you know exactly what they're going to be looking for. Personally, that's a little bit, I don't think, proper, ranging on probably making people mad at times. So I wouldn't do that. I just say make as good a resume as possible. Next is getting past recruiters. This is, at least for our field, there's a level of technicality that is not that a recruiter just straight up doesn't have. They're going to see words, even relating to current events. We are hearing about how computing security is moving to cybersecurity, our department name. And one of the big forces driving that is recruiters don't know that there's a difference between cybersecurity and computing security. So we kind of have to spell out everything for them, make it as easy as possible for them to say, yeah, this is actually a good candidate. How do you, to someone who doesn't know anything about what you're applying to, and most of the time they'll know the general description, they won't know like half of the words in that description, but how do we get it past that person? How do they say, yeah, this is definitely a good enough person to get on to the next step? And then lastly, there's hiring managers. And then with that, they'll also bring in some employees in order to say like, hey, does this person pass like the check, the vibe check, the technical check, whatever it is. So this will get passed to the hiring managers as well as a general group of employees normally. So you have to be able to have a resume that appeals both to a machine, someone who's not technical, and someone who's probably very technical. And then bonus points if you can just make it look nice. And as I've crossed out, anything on it is true. Because there are a lot of people that will just completely bloat their resume with stuff that they didn't do to get past the stuff and makes excuses later. So, freshman year, I was the same as you guys. RIT Sec was yelling at me, make a resume, make a resume. Why don't you have a resume? Make a resume. And I'm like, you know what? I'm a freshman. I'm going to do the best job I did. And I pulled out Microsoft Word and made the most atrocious thing I've ever seen. Like, I feel like it was a little bit better than some, but still, making my own formatting was definitely a very different thing. Uh, Good things like my name was on it, very large. I kind of kept that as a. I don't know exactly why I kept that, but you'll see that as a motif or a theme throughout all my resumes. How it's large, pronounced, and then ultimately, you know whose resume it's on. That's been my thought. Some bad things. Inefficient use of white space. I'm going to be talking about this a lot. There's so much more that you can put on that resume. It doesn't look organized because there's like lines that go halfway through the page, and you're like, okay, this person doesn't care enough to even fill out through the rest of the page. Inconsistent spacing. My freshman brain, like you can especially see it in that like box. I wanted to make them all the same length, so I changed the font size. I misspelled RITSEC or miscapitalized, and then there's just a whole lot of irrelevant experience. Like I'm sure as a freshman, it's not a big deal if you have Dunkin' Donuts on your resume, but realistically, for a professional resume, it's not a huge thing you should have. So this is the starting point. This is me going into Microsoft Word, spending like an hour. And then I heard about John Newman and his LaTeX resume. So I spent a lot of time trying to learn LaTeX. I ultimately just heavily refaced something on Overleaf. I created a bunch of like custom functions in order to build this, and I definitely think it looks nicer. It looks a lot nicer in my opinion. So good. We now have that more efficient use of white space. There's clean lines. You can pretty much navigate exactly what's happening, what's going on, and who this person is. Everything is pretty standardized. And I'd hope some people would agree that it looks relatively nice. What's bad is there's still that inefficient use of white space. There's an entire like inch column going down the resume that's just not being used. And some of the text for my, I don't know whether you would call it being wise or just an idiot, or I, in order to pronounce whatchamacallit, headings, I made everything else lighter and harder to read. So that was something that I learned a little bit later that I shouldn't have done. But nonetheless, it's something to learn from. And then finally, what everyone's here for, what the hell does an HTML resume look like? Personally, I spent a lot of time researching if this was even possible. And honestly, it's a little bit janky how I put it all together, as you'll soon see when we go through kind of a demo on how I made it. But this is what it looks like now. This is taken from a lot of people's resumes, a lot of tips and tricks that I've learned along the way. And you can see white space, it's pretty much all used up. There's not many words that you can fit in that would ultimately just throw off the balance of the resume. I like to, going back to like that freshman year, I always had this idea, the most important stuff should be top left. That's where you start reading anything. And so I put my name and what they want to read first. So that's what I did. I tried to aim it so that top left is the most important stuff and the bottom right isn't. So more than likely, they're going to be hitting the most important stuff first, most pertinent stuff first. All eyes are drawn at important titles. I did this with the mix of colors, bolding, and bullet points. And personally, I believe it's pretty visually appealing. Bad stuff? I really hope not. Like I said, this is I think I tracked it. It's like 20 to 30 hours I worked on this and trying to learn HTML specific to resumes, which is very niche and kind of not done too often. This does compile into a PDF though. So going back, looking at all this, what exactly are the outcomes here? So first off, I want to compare the tools. Word, or you could really say Google Docs or something, they are a built-in all-in-one tool, and they're specifically for PDFs and stuff like that. So everything is very visual. It is anyone can pick it up, use it, and make something generally nice. They can customize. Customizability is generally low because you don't have the ability to, like, as you'll see with HTML and LaTeX, you can put in negative spaces in order to like do stuff with your resume that Word just straight up cannot. Uh, Again, easy learning curve. Everyone uses this, and it's because it's so easy. Next is LaTeX. You need to compile a resume. So there's stuff like or is it Everleaf, Overnote, Everleaf? What is it? Overleaf. Wow, I really put Evernote on there. I don't know why I always confuse those two. Overleaf. Overleaf helps. You pretty much have two files. One is your PDF, and every single time you change the .text, which is what you create your PDF with, you have to recompile it. And what Overleaf does is you're able to just Control S and it will automatically populate. It does take a second. And if you're trying to develop just locally on your laptop, it's a pain. Next, it's very hard to debug. There are so many functions just built into LaTeX that you don't know how to overwrite. And even starting from base, like just completely basic install, it's starting, it's nearly impossible to figure out exactly what you want to do, how to do it, and what those things are to accomplish it. Just because there's so much built into it, it's very easy to get lost and not know why. I don't know. It's like putting everything 1 inch to the side, and then everything you look up is for a solution that's not what you're doing. Overall, it's a very steep learning curve, but once you hit that learning curve, you have pretty much free reign for customization. Anything that you can do with a PDF, you can do with LaTeX, but it comes at the cost of a heavy learning curve, and debugging is just not there. Lastly, HTML benefits, or I just like HTML overall. First off, all you need is a text editor, and your browser will automatically act as your way of debugging. You can use stuff like developer tools to know exactly where you're padding your margins, everything is going. You have a lot of tools at your disposal, and all of them built straight into what you already have on your computer. I said that I spent a lot of time on HTML and CSS. It is far easier to learn than LaTeX is, and it's far more applicable. There's going to be a lot more people looking for HTML and CSS skills in our field than they are for LaTeX. Generally, I'd say. Whole lot of customizations. There's so many. It's HTML and CSS. There is so many websites dedicated to teaching you both. There's so many tools built to make stuff as nice as possible, as easy as possible. And you can look up absolutely anything, and there's 20 Stack Overflow articles on it, no matter how niche. It's pretty much got all the benefits of LaTeX, but it's just an easier learning curve, and the debugging is beyond anything that LaTeX has. And just a small note to both LaTeX and HTML, because they're just text files, they're very easy for tracking using Git. So you can now make a Git repository, and even if your computer completely dies because you're running Arch or something, you will still have your resume, everything that you put time into, tracked, versioned, and absolutely everything. So we kind of went over what they generally look like, what the benefits are. Let's talk about how you actually set up HTML to build a resume. So in order to save your resume as a PDF, there's a very technical Control P. You can convert HTML to a PDF inside your resume. What it does is there's a I forget exactly what it is. It is ultimately a universal connector that basically has the ability to convert something in HTML straight to the PDF language, because that's ultimately what it is. If you ever just like look inside a PDF, it's just like plain text, and there's like streams and a whole bunch of other stuff. It's able to directly convert those two. So it kind of does what LaTeX is as like a low-level PDF language, and it converts it, compiles it. HTML can do very much the same thing. And what it does is it just takes the body of the body of whatever web page you're using. So perhaps you make a body that is the exact same size as a standard piece of paper, so it doesn't have to do any guessing for it. And you set up your margins just like you would on a normal page. So we see our HTML, we're going to be setting this as our background because that's not going to be included. You set it as a dark color, you make sure that there's like some top and bottom between where your page starts. Your body is exactly a width of 8.5 inches as a normal piece of paper. And then your height, this is where it gets weird because whenever you try to print a resume based on HTML, it will automatically add like a really weird margin on the top that is like documented nowhere and very specific. This is me going like 30 minutes just changing numbers around in order to make sure that it's exactly that. So it's a height of like you get 10.58325. That's how much space you get for whatever reason. I did it all for you, so you don't have to deal with that. And we now have a resume container inside that HTML with our own predetermined margins. And just like that, we have a plain piece of paper. There's a lot there just to say we have a plain piece of paper, but we do. Two other things. I built this so that when I post this, you can go back and use this verbatim to make your own. So there's a lot of everything's a little bit verbose for you, but you're going to want to switch your margins and options to none. Otherwise, it's going to be on like the bottom right and saying you printed this from file, whatever. And then it will also give you a bunch of weird margins. Those options are just to make sure that you can have free reign over it. So you have a blank piece of paper. Now we need to write stuff. And as you'd imagine, it's exactly like HTML. Let's start with just like adding a title to yours. Inside your resume container, which is your resume, which already has the padding built in, or your margins built in, we can just make something called a title container, and inside we add a title. We can see it's simple as that title container. In the CSS to the right is a flex box, and we're centering it. And then we set our font size for it, and it works. It's just simple as that. We have a very easy way to convert general HTML and CSS to a PDF that works. And so we have that. Of course, we have the ability to debug now. We have something on the paper, so that means we can kind of mess with some of the other cool functionality. For one, if anything's interacting weird, which I'm sure everyone's seen all the memes about HTML and CSS acting weird, there's a bunch of developer tools, or my favorite is just like 3 lines in your CSS. You set a star attribute that basically says absolutely everything in this resume, and then you set an outline so you know exactly where your boxes are running, what's contained in them, and you can see a lot with that. And just generally, I think I made most of my resume with this, so you can see exactly where your lines are running, make sure everything is a clean line, and there's no questions about it. It shows like all the interactions between flex boxes and pretty much all that. You get like a good understanding of HTML and how it works from this too, which is personally something that I learned a lot from, is just using this small little trick. And then just be sure to remove that attribute every so often. Make sure your resume actually looks nice without all the red boxes. Okay, so that was a quick side note. How do we add some contact info? Again, this is all to be as simple as possible. So we're going step by step. Next is the contact information. And just like that, it's like 10 lines and you're able to implement absolutely all your contact info. You create a container called contact container, where really you can call all this whatever you want. You just have to make sure that it matches in your template or your CSS. And you make that container, again, a flexbox. You'll be learning a lot about flexboxes doing this. Flexboxes are a very cool thing in HTML that is personally just something very lacking from LaTeX. LaTeX requires you to just define like H spaces, that's horizontal space, and D spaces, and then you can just have those randomly extend, and there's not great documentation on how exactly they work, but they work somehow. So then you justify it to make everything put in the center, You make sure that it's in a row, and you don't want to wrap to a new page. And then for each of the individual contact informations, you specify a font as well as how much you want the space in between all of the all the contact information. And simple as that, you now have a generally pretty nice looking heading. I'd say that's a little bit better than a lot of the templates that I've seen. And we've written this in like 30 lines of HTML and like 50 of CSS, and it's all very readable, very understandable. And then the other really cool thing, personally, I didn't think this would first work when I was doing it, but like I was saying, there is that direct connector that allows HTML to be directly converted to PDF. So your A tags, your hyperlinks are now actually hyperlinks inside the PDF. You can click on them like you could with LaTeX, and it's all very cool, very in the know. I don't know what you call it, but yeah, and it's very simple CSS. You just want to make sure that nothing turns blue or anything. So nothing turns blue and there's no underline. So you just text decoration inherit and color inherit. And I'm hoping that you guys are kind of seeing how HTML interacts, because when you're first looking at HTML, there's way too much to understand, because it is the language is very specific. You need to define absolutely everything, and when you're defining absolutely everything, there's too much to learn from. And then all we have to do is wrap whatever text you have in those A tags, and then you can do all that. So now you have a telephone link that when you click on your phone, it will try to call you as long as you hit yes. You have an email, which when you click, it will try to open your default email app, and then hyperlinks that will actually bring you to like your GitHub or your LinkedIn or your personal website. I meant to put this in here and I kind of forgot, but that mail to, whenever you have an href for mail to, there's actually a lot of options you can add to that. So one of my favorite, I've always thought it'd be pretty funny to put this in my resume, but you can define options for content. You can define options for the title. So theoretically, a recruiter clicks on your email and all of a sudden they're prompted in their default mail editor with the subject "you're hired!" exclamation mark, and then a bunch of contact about like your salary, your pay, and all they have to do is click send, and it's easy as that. Theoretically, that's something you could do. Whether I'd recommend that is something else. But I think that person would be funny if you just want to put that online, and random people will like click it and follow it. But yeah, links are easy as that, and they just work. It's something surprising that just this stuff works. Like it was personally really enlightening that all this work was put in, and then just no one really uses HTML to PDF conversions, because a lot of people are like, why would you ever do this? And my answer was make a resume, and it worked out really well. Next is sections. These are just as simple as adding everything else. Again, a little bit over verbose, but we have a container, which contains a heading, which also contains your subsection. And those subsections contain headings and items. And you can kind of see how this is built out. You can see the CSS is building a top and a bottom or some margins on the top and the bottom of the container. You can see us declaring exactly what the font, that the font's bold and what size it is for our heading. And then all we have to do is add these attributes to our HTML, and it just works. And it's all, I don't know, HTML is it's a markup language, so everything's encapsulated in something else. So once you start to understand that and how those encapsulations work, you can make this very nice. So this is literally just as base as you can do, and it just generally looks nice. Next, one of the main things in my resume is columns. I use this a lot. And the other thing that a lot of people, or a lot of ATSs have an issue with is recognize what's a column and what's just a straight line. So they will just continue to like read across, and like some will always mess it up. Some have the ability to actually realize when a PDF is created that has columns. Luckily, HTML already does that work for you. It's able to declare exactly what a column is. And when you highlight, it won't just go on to the next line. And we have a PDF that does that. Of course, with ATSs. Some of them are just dumb, and you'll have to fight that. That's your own personal preference on whether you want to have a resume that has columns, because it is a little bit of pain when you try to autofill. But yeah, all we have to do is make something called a column container, and then we declare a column left and column right. Inside of Flexbox, there's some special attributes. One is called flex. So basically, this is how all the different objects or all the different tags inside a Flexbox. It will pretty much say, okay, these all exist. We'll just smush them together, or just put them as close together as possible. But with Flex, we can basically say, hey, I want this container to be 2 times the size of this container. So we see this in Flex 2 and Flex 1. So that first column is always going to be twice as large as the second column, no matter what else is in there. And it's just a cool way of actually building it out. You have very granular control on everything. Again, just if you have any questions, there's like W3 schools. There's, I think it's like the MS something docs for, I forget exactly what it's called. There's so many good resources online to teach you this. And there's just even like Instagram pages that will do half the work for you with how to write CSS. And then, of course, we couldn't go forever without talking about HTML issues. Kind of want to put this towards the end, but so font issues with PDF conversions. This is something that I spent like 5 hours trying to debug, and it was me. This presentation was originally going to be me comparing HTML to a LaTeX resume that I made in the exact same way, and I was going to go through like how to make a LaTeX resume, how to make an HTML resume. That stopped, or that was originally because I couldn't get my stuff to work. Every single time I had an FL or an FI next to each other, it created like a Unicode character that looked exactly right. But whenever it autofilled, it was just like this unknown. You can actually see it here, the little question mark, and that would get autofilled by ATSs, and it annoyed me to all ends. And I spent too much time debugging that. You tried like special characters, never thought to change the font. But yeah, so if you just change the font to something that's generally accepted, like an open standard, something that is just overall something good, you'll have a lot less of those issues. I was using something custom that I thought looked nice, and I ran into that issue. So first off, make sure your font is something that works. So I think I'm currently using Open Sans. Of course, like Arial, like anything that's supported by the browser default is fine. But anything beyond that, you might just need to like test out and like run a couple of tests, whatever. Margins can also sometimes be a little bit funky. This is not with HTML or PDFs alone, it's that conversion in the center. For whatever reason, there's like a 50-50 chance if your line is exactly the size of whatever your column is, it might just go onto another line. So my best advice is just make sure that's always like or like not an inch, but like a character or so away from the edge, and you'll never have an issue. And last thing, make sure to always use static sizes. So a big thing with HTML, and if you're doing proper HTML development, is you want dynamic sizes. So if someone shrinks their, or someone increases the size of their box, it gets larger, or their, their web page, it like shows larger, you can actually view it nicer, and like everything scales perfectly. You don't want it to scale. You want it to be exactly the size as you set it, so that it always looks the same no matter how you're viewing it. And this is something that I ran into initially, because I'd like zoom in to try to see like, hey, what's that weird interaction? And all of a sudden my title was the entire size of the page. So some small stuff there. Overall, I think they greatly outweigh what the benefits are. The benefits greatly outweigh the issues. And then lastly, I want to kind of leave on some tips and tricks that I've learned along the way. So we talked about this a lot. Use your white space well. Personally, I guess at this point, it's a pet peeve that I want to make everything look like it's a true document, that I'm not just kind of like throwing bullet points together and I'm like, oh, okay, so what? This is like half a line shorter than the last one. I want to just try to use your white space and find the perfect, what you define as the perfect in between of being way too cluttered and way too sparse, and just try to meet that middle point of making it look nice, making your resume efficient, making it verbose enough that anyone is able to understand it, while also not alienating anyone who's technical or non-technical. It's a lot of things to say. It's just you got to know your own experience and know how to market to both, and then from there you can build a good resume off that. Next, direct focus to important parts. I talked about this role a little bit, and I don't. I feel like I heard it somewhere. I feel like I might have just dreamt it one day or something. Yes, source, I dreamt it. Um, uh, but I feel just like how English works and a lot of like language works. You always read from the left. Of course, there's like some languages where you don't do that. But I feel like you should always have all the important stuff in top left. Your left column should be more important than your right column. What's above some, or like if you're putting something above another, it should be more important because of that. And you go by that rule, and ultimately, I feel like it's you get to a point where it's you will always hit the most important parts first. Those recruiters will always hit the most important parts first before they put down your resume. There's always enough there that they're not going to say, "Oh, this person doesn't know anything," or if they do, it's because you're good enough. Maybe it isn't just like good enough for them, or whatever it is. Either way, you're putting your best foot forward. Continually update your resume. I am very guilty of this. There are like months, ranging on like seasons, where I don't touch my resume at all. It just sits there. I don't update it. I don't look at the verbiage again. I don't see like, hey, did I learn something in these past couple months? This is a great way to fight imposter syndrome because you're saying, hey, what do I know? What am I confident about? What have I done in these past couple months to know that is both marketable and something I'm proud of? Because I'd like to talk about this in a interview. How do I combat those two? And just I don't know, take it as a chore, take it as like I want to do something completely mindless for like an hour because I just had this really annoying midterm. Do whatever you want, but yeah. Next, host it. The other benefit that I kind of didn't talk about is it's HTML. Who cares? Like throw it on a website, and you don't have to compile it. It's going to be natively. It's going to be natively accessible by anyone's phone. You can view everything. It works exactly the same. But even if you have the PDF, still just host your what can you call it? Resume. I said that word too many times. I've forgotten what it is. But one of the things that I've actually had a lot of success with this because there's always that point in time where you're like, ah, shit, I don't have my resume, and there's someone really cool there that I want to show it off to them. I want to talk with this person, but I don't want to be like just saying, hey, on my resume I have something. If you ever go to like for personally me, it's resume.maxfuss.co, and right there I have my resume. GitHub Pages, if anyone wants to look into it, super cool. It's free hosting. Of course, it's only static hosting, so stuff like this where it's just a static PDF, perfect. And now you always have access to your PDF in case you want to download it. You're on a new machine and you're trying to fill out something that requires your resume. You don't have to go through the process of like, oh, I have to go to my computer and change it over. It's all on the web. It's all on everything you need it for is immediately accessible. Another pet peeve that I've accrued is your email should look like it's yours. Uh, Personally, I didn't originally do this. I had like a personal email that was kind of stupid. Like I have some examples. Personally, abc.12, like the RIT email is so improperly formatted. There's like nothing descriptive about you besides your first and last initial. Uh, all I imagine is when you're a recruiter, there's a very good possibility that so many of them fat finger it, because what are they going to really realize? Oh, I typed one character off. I typed one number off. If you put something like your name at mail.rit, which, by the way, is absolutely a free service that RIT does, if you go to start.rit.edu, you have it. I also talked about I have my own website, maxfuss.co. Nothing's on it, but I now have my own email. So whenever I'm talking to recruiters, whenever I'm doing anything job related, we have that segmentation, and I'm like, oh, jobs at maxfuss.co, and it's easy as anything. And you have that like barrier between your personal and work life, and you're able to organize your inboxes and such and so forth, and it looks professional. There's a whole bunch of good things that come with it. And lastly, take pride in it. This is the thing that is likely going to be speaking for you when you can't. It is going to be indicator on whether you get a job. It can be it is the indicator of so many things that people don't give enough credit, don't put enough work into their resume. Uh, Take pride in it. If you're happy with it, I'm sure that a recruiter will be. Uh, yeah, I don't think I have a ton more. I'd like to open it up to questions, whether these are general, whether it's respective to HTML and like all that. But yeah, questions.
Do you ever pair your resume with a cover letter?
Do I ever pair my resume with a cover letter? Uh, I am very guilty of this. You should always, if you have the ability to upload a cover letter, do it. It's not going to hurt. It's not ever going to hurt. It can only help to improve your chances. I have been too lazy, and it's always that like, oh, I'll do that tomorrow thing, and I've never actually written a cover letter, other than in like the CSEC 99 class or whatever it is. And but yeah, once you have a cover letter, you can format it very easily, uh, and just apply it to any job. Again, it can never hurt unless you like I don't know you post like pictures in it and like make it your own like personal like I have no idea. I'm sure that someone has made such an atrocious cover letter at some point that it prevented them from a job. But I don't imagine that you ever get to that point unless you want it to be that. Likewise, thing that I've been doing that's been helping a lot: template all your answers to like questions that you get in uh, whether in an interview and you're like, oh, that's a good question. I never thought about that. So you can have a better answer later, because a lot of the times recruiters just reuse stuff. And then likewise, whenever you're filling out an application, have template those questions and get answers to them, and then just I don't know, use like Jinja formatting and put company name in there, so that no matter what, you have a meaningful response. Whether it's like actually meaningful to that company, who cares? But you now have something that looks good enough. You've put in thought into it, and it's not just like off the dome. So HTML and CSS, there are so many resources. Personally, W3 Schools is amazing. I think on Instagram, I just like started subscribing to like a bunch of random just HTML and CSS things, and then they always have these like really creepy pictures of just like photorealistic like cartoon characters, and then it's like, oh, this is how you use a flex box. Really freaking creepy, but they work very well. There are a ton of resources. W3 School is always where I go whenever I have a question. There are a ton of resources on YouTube. If you ever just HTML and CSS are such a large thing. You need there's one like skill that is just vital. It's knowing how to Google and how to break up exactly what your question is. Because I don't know if you're trying to look how to center something. Okay, what are you trying to center? Are you trying to center text? Are you trying to center a div? Are you trying to center just random stuff on a page? You got to be able to say exactly what you're doing inside what context and like use that. So W3 School is definitely what I use the most, but just generally Google, Stack Overflow, all that, huge, huge, huge tool.
When adding more text to boxes, do you have to manually change the text size?
So the question was, when you're adding new boxes, do you have to manually change the sizes of boxes and like such and so forth? Oh, the text inside the box. So HTML works hierarchically. So you get it. But say you have your outermost box has say 1 pixel or whatever you want to call it, one point font, and then you make another box inside of it, and it's two point. Anything you put inside that box is going to be 2 point. Anything you put in the larger box is going to be 1 point. So anything the closest CSS is going to always take precedent, unless there's also another tag that's called it's what exclamation point important, and then you can try to override that. But generally, it's whatever whatever is closest, whatever is the most specific, it's gonna take that, and a lot of it's just gonna come down to how you use it. Uh,
Throughout your research, did you ever find a tool that would allow you to like convert Google Docs into HTML, or did you just rebuild everything from scratch?
I rebuilt everything from scratch.
Okay.
Personally, I don't think that the HTML resumes are very niche. I didn't find any other examples of this when I was trying to do it. I'm sure somewhere out there, someone like made like everything that I looked up, it's like, oh, make your website into your resume and like make all this like cool stuff and like such and so forth. But realistically, there's not a ton of this online. It's the example that I showed and like random people talking on a website. But I don't think there's anything to convert Google Docs or anything like that to HTML. My advice is whenever you're trying to make a revision, unless it's super minor, wipe from a new slate. You're always going to have a different thought. You're going to try to improve it. You're going to have to relook at every single sentence that you put in, and that's can only be good for your resume. Whereas when you're making a small little edit, you're going to change a couple like words. You're going to add a new experience, but all that you have in your resume to that point just kind of gets ignored, left in, and so you'll end up with like a skill that you had maybe 4 years ago that you just don't even know what the word is anymore.
Well, so if you have Microsoft Word, you can convert, except it's a very bad conversion.
Very bad
You
conversion.
technically can do it, but it's bad.
Oh, I didn't even think about this. So whenever you actually, you can all like test this out on your computer right now. If you render any PDF on a web page, it will automatically convert everything to HTML. But it's absolutely terrible. It's atrocious. It just every single space is not a space. It's like a span, and it says this many pixels. So realistic from PDF to HTML, there is a conversion. I would not recommend that conversion because it just like statically pushes everything and says, I want this to be at exactly this pixel point and at exactly this size. And there's no way to format it. You have a question?
Are you hosting your resume right now?
Yep. If you're curious to look at it, resume.maxfuss.co. Just my name, .co, and I don't know, it looks nice. But yeah, I recommend anyone to get a personal website. It's like $10 a year and makes yourself stand out a little bit more, even if you don't put anything on it. Okay. Any other questions?